Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful, delicious semi-sourdough buns. They're beautiful and crispy, they're like mini baguettes. They're so fun and so cute. Let's get started. The day before you make your dough, you want to activate your sourdough starter. This is mine, his name is Van Dough. He has been a little bit neglected. He's starting to get some hooch on top, or some kind of like grey liquid, which is called hooch, which is a sign that he's very hungry. I don't think I fed him for about 2 weeks. I'm very sorry, I still love you. But that's okay. One, because this recipe uses yeast and we're just adding in the sourdough for flavour, it doesn't matter as much, but also we're going to bring him back to life. So I have equal amounts of water and flour here by weight. So I have 25 grams of each. I don't know how much starter is in here, just however much. I normally just keep quite a small amount. That's like ½ centimetre across the base of the container. And just to give it a little bit of a boost, I'm going to add in some honey. All I'm going to do is dip my spoon in a tiny bit of honey like that. And then I'm going to add in my water first and give it a good mix. I just find it easier adding the water first to help the original sourdough to dissolve into there. Super lumpy, doesn't matter. Once it's mostly mixed, I'm going to add in my flour, give it a good mix. I'm just going to pop the lid on and leave him at room temperature overnight. It's the next day. My starter, Van Dough, is a little bit more alive than he was yesterday, looking a bit happier. I'm going to add some of my starter. I'm doing 75 grams, hopefully I have enough. Yes, I do. Into my bowl of water. And I've just got a little bit of starter left in my pottle, and I'm going to feed that with another 25 grams of flour, 25 grams of water, and stick him in the fridge, and in another week I will feed him and bake him again. So I'm doing enough of a feed now to kind of replenish, and then a feed just before I use him to keep him alive. Or sorry, the feed now will keep him alive, the feed just before will make him more active, give him more flavour and more power. This is not a pure sourdough recipe. We're going to be adding yeast in. I'm adding the sourdough for flavour and also for the texture. I want to mix halfway between those big airy sourdough bubbles and a tight normal bread dough. So I'm going to add in a teaspoon of the yeast. This is a ½ teaspoon, so I'm doing 2. And then I'm going to start to mix the 2 together. Or the 3, the water, the sourdough and the yeast. I have 2 types of flour. I have some wholemeal flour and some plain flour. A really small amount of wholemeal flour, just to add some flavour. But it doesn't have enough gluten on its own to give you a nicely developed bread. So once I've got that into a rough dough, I'm going to tip that onto the bench. I'm going to show you how to knead this by hand, but you can absolutely do it in a stand mixer with the hook attachment, or if you have one of those nice spiral mixers, you can use that. So to begin with, just squeezing it together. I like to use one hand only when it's really wet like this, and then later I can bring my other hand in. So what we're doing is we're going to be mixing our dough, developing the gluten, so these tiny little rubber bands within our flour that we want to be nice and stretchy, so that when our yeast grows from both our yeast that we've added and our sourdough starter, our dough can actually grow with it. Whereas if we don't have any gluten developed in there, our yeast will grow and our dough won't be able to grow. There'll be no structure for it to continue to grow with it. And this is a very soft and sticky dough, which is what will give us really nice airy crumb, or will help assist with that. So once I've got all the bits of flour in, I'm going to start with a kneading technique called the slap and fold method. And what you do is you'll take your dough, slap it down, fold it over. Repeat that process. And you can do this with nice sticky doughs like this. It's harder to do with firmer doughs. I can see already, I can feel that my dough is getting a bit firmer. as the gluten develops, it absorbs more liquid. I'm only going to do this for about 5 minutes or so. So after a few minutes of kneading, honestly, not even 5 minutes, your dough should look something like this. It might take slightly longer in the machine. You can see it's lovely and smooth. You can test if it's ready by stretching it out nice and thin, and it should almost pass the window pane test. So you can almost see the light through it before it breaks. You have to be really gentle when doing this because it's still bread dough. Even the strongest dough is going to rip quite easily. So just pulling it nice and thin like that. Even if it's not quite at the window pane stage, that will be okay because the gluten will continue to develop as it rests and hydrates. Because it's such a soft dough, the hydration is going to help with that. I'm just going to roll it into a nice little tight ball, pop it in a bowl, cover it with cling film on the surface to stop it from forming a skin. I'm going to leave it at room temperature for an hour or two until it's kind of doubled in size. And then I'm going to leave it in the fridge overnight, but I will show you what it looks like once it's doubled. It has been about 2 hours. My dough has a little bit more than doubled in size. I kind of forgot about it, but that's fine. I'm now just going to stick them in the fridge until tomorrow. That's going to slow down the fermentation or the growth of my dough, and it will increase that sourdough flavor. So I'm going to stick him in the fridge, not touching him, and we'll be back tomorrow to shape and bake our beautiful little baguettes. It is the next day. My dough has been in the fridge overnight. I think I put it in the fridge around, I don't remember what time, but yesterday afternoon. So you can see it's risen even more, but a lot more slowly than it did to start with. And so now I'm going to shape it. So I'm going to very carefully take the cling film off. What I want to do is I want to shape the dough without deflating it too much, because I want to keep those kind of uneven air bubbles that I have in there. So I'm just going to use a pastry scraper around the edge to loosen the dough from the bowl, and then flip them upside down like that, and a little sprinkle of flour. I'm going to weigh my dough into about 100-gram pieces. I'm just trying to cut it very gently without squishing out too much air. You can see we have quite a beautiful, as you cut it, you'll be able to see those bubbles that have formed. So that's given me 9 buns, plus I have a little bit of leftover. So I'm just going to cut this into 9 little pieces to spread evenly amongst the dough. Alright, now it's time for my favorite part, which is the shaping. Like I said, I really want to keep as much air in this dough as possible, so I want to work it quite minimally, but we do need to work it so that we're creating tension in the dough. And so the way I do that is I kind of stretch it out. I almost shape this like a mini sourdough loaf. So I start by folding it over about a third, pulling the sides and folding them in. Repeat that process, and then roll it up and give it a little bit of a roll. This is kind of the pre-shape. So this is not the normal method that I would shape a dough ball. Normally I would just squish it down and roll it, but that squishes out all the air. What I'm trying to do instead is I'm trying to pull it, and you can almost like see the strands of gluten running along as you pull it. So pull it out and fold it over, pull the sides inwards, and again, roll them up, give it a little round. And this will help keep the shape of our baguettes really nice and round, because those strands of gluten create this tension that creates the round ball. So take your piece, pull it outwards, and when I'm pulling gently. I'm not squishing the air out, I'm just pulling it into shape. Pull, fold, corners in, roll them up. I like to just give it a good tight seam at the bottom there. I really like this recipe because it gives you a lovely flavoured baguette that's really nice and crispy, but it's not quite as much admin as sourdough sometimes feels like, and it's a bit more reliable because it doesn't rely fully on the starter. It's relying on the yeast as well, or it has the yeast as well, which helps to know it is going to rise even if your starter is not that great. Because with sourdough, if your starter is not that strong or you do some things wrong, it can be a bit of a faff. I do love making sourdough, but this is kind of my go-to recipe. If I'm going around somewhere and someone asks me to bring bread or dinner rolls or something, this is super easy. It does take a couple of days, but it's mostly hands-off time. And I haven't tried it, but I'm pretty sure you could do it with an inactive starter as well. So we fed the starter the day before yesterday and made the dough yesterday. Could probably just use the starter straight away and I think it would be fine. And the more you do this and the more you work with the dough, you'll find it easier to work with. Because it really is all about how the dough is feeling. The dough kind of tells you what it wants. So over here I have some baking trays with some muslin cloth. I just have these because I do bread classes sometimes, and so it's easier if I have dedicated ones. If you're just making this occasionally at home, you can use a nice clean tea towel. Absolutely fine. I'm just going to sprinkle it generously with flour. I was testing this the other day before I filmed it and thinking of my lovely customer Tanya, who came and did the bread class, and I had cut these cloths, and she came and she took them home and overlocked them all for me so they weren't so stringy, which is so lovely. So thanks Tanya, you're great. So I've done that, heaps of flour on there, and now I can go back to my first bun, giving it time to rest and for the gluten to relax, and I'm going to shape it into a baguette shape. I don't have much flour here. My hands have a bit of excess flour on them from working with the dough, but not enough to make them kind of not sticky, because I want the dough to kind of stick to the bench. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press down evenly and roll out to get my nice pointy dough. And I'm going to put that on my muslin cloth. I'm going to do another one, so I did my dough kind of like this in terms of which one I rolled first, so I'm following that order, so the dough I use is the most relaxed dough. And if you find your baguette hasn't turned out how you want, you can kind of squish it back together, leave it to rest, and then come back to it. And so you want to try do it seam side down on the muslin cloth. And basically what this is going to do, so I'm going to pinch and then lay my next one on, and then put my dough in between that, and the pieces of dough will help the bread hold its shape because it is a softer dough. So you take your dough, the seam is at the bottom, you can see bench unfloured, and just squeezing using this part of your hand here, so the end of your palms, to really flatten it down. You can be quite aggressive because it's going to spring back quite a lot. Just like that. And so that's the seam I can see at the top there now. So I'm going to lay that next to those other baguettes. Take the next piece of dough, lay him on my piece of muslin, lift it up. And if you want to make bigger baguettes or thinner baguettes, because these are going to come out like little round balls with little ends, you just roll the center piece longer. And you can see basically where it's a little bit uglier will be the seam side. Take your tray, pop them on. And then just fold like that. Squish them together. Pop them on. I'll lift that up to help that last one stay in shape. Give them a bit of a push. You can see at the moment, when I press them, they spring back quite easily and they've got a bit of firmness to them. I'm going to leave them for about half an hour or so. And while I leave them to prove, I'm going to preheat my oven to 190 degrees. So it's been half an hour. I'm really happy with how my little buns are looking. If I zoom in, they're a little bit, they take more of an indent than they did before. These don't prove hugely because we want for them to still have some expansion left in them for when we score them. That will make sense when you see them when they come out of the oven. So more about half an hour, lets them kind of warm up to room temperature. On a really cold day it might be an hour. I'm going to pull out my muslin cloth and just tip my little baguettes onto my hand like that, and then place them on the tray. Pull out the fabric, flip them over, on he goes. You can probably fit them on one tray, but I always get paranoid they're going to touch, so I do it over 2 trays. And just touching them as little as possible to get that nice airy feel, keep those bubbles in there. Now I'm going to score them. My preferred scoring method is actually using a little serrated knife. I find it much easier than using the little the little razor blades. So I'm going to go on an angle. My knife is that's flat against it, so maybe 45 degrees. And I'm going to go quite long across the baguette. So I'm just going to do one confident score. That's the key with scoring, is really to be confident. If you need to, you can wet your knife as well. And now these are going to go in the oven. After 14 minutes in the oven, these are what the buns look like. They've split open beautifully at that seam. So that's where we wanted them to be slightly underproof, so they have that room to expand and create that little ear there. Beautifully golden on the bottom. And I'm going to cut one open and see, hopefully, a beautiful crumb. Should really wait for it to cool down before doing this, but I'm too impatient. That's exactly what we're after. It's not as big and airy as a sourdough, but it does have some uneven bubbles, some flavor from the sourdough, as well as some flavor from the whole wheat flour that we put in there. It's so delicious. These are best eaten as soon as they've come out of the oven. Like I said, let them cool down a little bit. You can hopefully hear how crunchy they are. As they sit in a few hours, like if I make them this morning for tonight, they're not going to be as good, but they're still going to be delicious. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. Let me know if you give these a go. If you have any questions, please like and subscribe and all the good things, and let me know what else you'd like to see from me.